Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Misinformed Masses podcast. This is Jeff, along with.
Matt, his co-host.
Yep, and today we're going to be talking about the picture, which is free colleges maybe in New York. And the backstory and the pros and cons, and what are the advantages of it happening, the downsides, all that fun jazz.
So are you telling me that the Bernie Sanders appeal has spread?
Well, I mean, I feel like New York is a core constituency of Bernie Sanders isms. When Idaho or Montana does this, then I'll,
True.
the proselytizing
So
will have spread.
so if it's California or New
New
York,
York, yeah. Well,
Cal-
don't worry, California can't afford it, but we'll talk about that later. That was the anti-cyclical funding of public works. Will that alone will just destroy any of this. So.
oh yeah,
Yeah, California's pretty boned. But anyway, moving on. So if you don't know the news, everybody, Cuomo, is this how you say his name? Cuomo? I think it's
yep,
Cuomo.
Cuomo.
Andrew Cuomo, who is the governor of New York, proposes free tuition at New York State colleges for eligible students. And apparently the eligibility is anybody with a parental or family income under $120,000.
Now in New York, most people around the country
Mm-hmm.
would hear 125, and they
Yep.
go, it's going after the rich." Well, New
What?
York, I mean, except for like upstate New York,
Yep.
and even there's parts of it, but New York, such as California, Florida, and a few other spots,
Mm-hmm.
125 for a joint income for two working parents. I mean, that's going to scoop up a lot of students,
Yeah.
or a
And
lot of prospective students.
Well, I think the the first one I'm showing here, the New York Times article mentioned it's still only 80% of New York families. So that 20% of the richest are not included. So that's a lot of people excluded, to be fair.
20% excluded.
Yeah, and let's be honest, they're also going to be the 20% who are probably paying the most for it,
I mean,
tax-wise.
yeah, well, yeah, tax-wise. I mean, it depends. If it's like 20% are excluded, sure, and it's like, oh, those rich people can afford it. I go back to New York City. It has one of the highest costs of living in the world, like top 10 or something. It's
Yeah.
pretty high up there. So, I mean, people complain about San Francisco right now having high rents. New York City has high rents. So you eat up through that money pretty fast raising a family.
Yeah, and
Also,
now you're making me
stop-
want to check my Economist handbook. I have it in my bag
Well,
somewhere.
That's
As we
why
go,
have it.
I'll keep a look on it. I don't think it has the city cost in this one, but yeah, the Economist loves to do that cost of living city index, with New York being
Well-
100.
Well, here's a question I have for you:
Yep.
is if it's not like they're excluding people who make over 500 or a million or
Yeah.
anything like that. It's 125. I mean, you can donate to a Roth IRA up until about, unless they've raised it recently, it's up to about $100,000.
Mm-hmm.
And you still, I mean, families hit those numbers pretty quickly too in these expensive to live states.
Yeah. So it'll have pros and cons, but let's set it out. So Cuomo claims it'll only cost. Let me find it in the article for us. Here we go. So he says, if you're looking at the screen right now, you'll see right here the $125,000 less a year will be eligible. Keep going down. It hasn't been passed yet, so don't hold your breath. Although it does indicate, New York Times indicates that a lot of politicians on both sides are pretty pro this move. Was it the other article that talks about it? I'm looking. Where are you, costs? Oh, here we go. So he claims, and we'll later debunk it slightly, it would only be $163 million by 2019. That's not even per year. He says that's total from now to then. So 2-year outlay is only $163 million. Totally.
Do these people not know how to math?
Well, remember, this is the governor's office calculates. That does not mean anybody in that office is making money. You know, I mean,
Well,
sorry, it has the ability to math. Let's be honest, they don't really.
well, actually, I'd be. I mentioned this to you in the pre-show. Would I'm not naive enough to believe that the people in charge are that dumb. There's a few
Yeah,
people up top that know it's not going to cost that much, but it's kind of just like the old proverbial camel's nose under the tent thing. Just get the program going, and then all of a sudden you're underfunded, and oh my gosh, you can't let these people not have funding. Ah, they
yeah.
depend on it.
So just for everybody watching this terrestrially, I'm showing the graph. The cities are a little bit cut off, but the red line, Matt found this for me. The red line is New York, seventh most expensive city. And it's about where it's been. So it just shows Singapore, Zurich, Hong Kong, Geneva, Paris, and London are more expensive. And Los Angeles is eighth, and Tokyo is wait, yeah, Los Angeles is eighth.
Tokyo's 11th, I think.
I believe it. So yeah, LA's expensive as balls. If you live here, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But yeah, so there we go. So not the cheapest place. So a lot of people will be excluded. So going back to what they claim. So even the New York Times, super skeptical. They do tell us how much school costs now. Apparently it's only 6,500 for the university and 4,300 for the community college per year. So it's
But
not.
that doesn't include cost of living,
No,
books.
no, and they haven't said if they're going to pay for any of that either.
Yeah, so it's like, oh look, we're gonna even let's say community college, $4,300 a year, and that's only for tuition.
Yeah,
Which, by the way, you're going to be spending about $4,500 on textbooks for 2 semesters too.
yeah,
If we're
it
going to be
could be that
honest.
high. Yeah, especially yeah, it's
Yeah.
totally possible.
So you get somebody in the door, and even I think in one of those articles they were saying even for the community college in New York, 4,500 bucks for a year of tuition, but it costs you between $16,000 and $23,000 just to live.
Yeah,
And then if you throw in another 2,000 for books, I mean, you're what? You're spending 5 times as much going to school as they're subsidizing. So
yeah, it's a good point. And yeah, that's so it's not free college, what everybody else is thinking. I mean, the thing that pushes you into debt, both of us, for those of you who are listening and don't know us, both of us spent all of our college at public universities. I think that's fair to say. Community college for
yeah,
both of us, and then both of us have been to Cal States, and I went to University of California as well. So we just doxed ourselves, but we're not trying to like hide our identities, so it's fine. But like we've been to the public schools. Definitely, the cost of living will hit you the hardest, and that's
no,
let's be
I
honest.
remember when we were at community. I remember when I was at community college, and there's these people with petitions with those petition boards. Come sign. And the one they love to harp on was tuition fees are getting raised. Now, mind you, out-of-state tuition at any state-run university in any state is almost the same price as a private school. So
Yeah,
you're an idiot, just go to a private school in that
or go,
case.
work for a year.
Um, yeah, but if you're a resident, I mean, it's cheap. It's really cheap.
Yeah, I don't
And
think
I
it's
think
4,500 for California
no,
community college. It's like
like at the
500
yeah at the time, like they were talking about like a $1.50 increase or like
per
per
unit.
unit, or it
Yeah,
was something even less than that. And they were complaining. So I asked this person every time I saw them, I always ask them how many units they're actually taking, and it was at somewhere between 6 and 8.
so it's part
Like
time.
part-time students complaining about it. So it's like you're spending an extra $16 a year, and you're complaining about this. No, go
Yeah.
away. Like
So
it's
yeah,
not a big deal.
and don't get me wrong, California is cheaper. So could they make community colleges cheaper? Yeah, totally. And I think Obama talked about that a lot. And of course, we have Bernie up here in the picture. I'm going to show Bernie Sanders again. Of course, Bernie and his supporters are really for this. You know, it's the handout for college age students, basically, who are his constituency. Let's be fair. So it's something to keep in mind. Now, even the New York Times links to a report that mentions just to make community colleges free in New York will cost between 138 million to 223 million. There's a link here if you're curious. I'll also link it in the description. But here we go. It's this study that was done by an independent budget office in New York for the New York City in 2015. It's very recent. And the lowball estimate is these numbers per year. And I think you found in here the total number of the cost of the system still like 700 million or something. So
No, it was for in an article they were talking about for 7 community colleges,
Mm-hmm.
the annual budget was over $900 million,
Yeah.
and
And the
the
city
state picks
colleges will
up
be more.
yes, city colleges and state colleges will be more. This is a community college,
Yeah.
and the state, what is it? And they're saying the state picks up probably 200 something million. The feds pick up 300 something, and the city itself picks up another 200 or 300 million, and then the students pay, and the rest is covered in tuition.
Yep.
But here's the problem: I mean, in that article, they even talk about they need, even when they do this, they need to find out a way to structure it so that the students still get federal and state funding,
Mm-hmm.
because they can't function if they don't get it. So
Yeah,
all
and
they're
he's
doing is
he's
just,
specifically referring to the article we're showing on the screen, by the way. This is a study that was done. You can even contact him if you're curious. So it was done by the city and state of New York. So something to take a look at if you're curious about this. So cost, it's expensive. Let's concede that right now. So even for a big state like New York, would you agree expensive?
oh yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, college is expensive, and then that gets into the whole: does everyone need to go to college?
Yeah,
But
and that well, let's transition to the pros and cons because I think cost. People don't have to believe us; they can look. There is stated cost. Is it something
oh,
a state can absorb? Yes. Let's be honest
well,
before
for
we
instance,
start,
even
though. Can they do it without increasing taxes or cutting spending somewhere or reforming part of the school system?
well, even in that article we were just talking about,
Mm-hmm.
since 2010, which is only six years ago now, well, technically
Yep.
seven. Um, the cost for those 7 community colleges has increased 55%,
Yep.
and those are run by the politicians already.
Yeah. So what's going to stop the cost from increasing again?
I'll have to find the article for it, but I remember they were a few years back. England finally allowed loans, like states, not state subsidized, but the state would give you loans to go to school, kind of like what we
Yep.
do here, to go to undergrad university,
Mm-hmm.
and they would fund up to a certain amount of dollars
But there
a
was a
year,
cap.
and it was about 4 times what the cost of the universities were at the time. Within a few years, the tuition costs of the universities met the cap exactly. So pretty much like almost quadrupling the cost of tuition and school.
Yeah, so that'll be a
And
downside of this system, but no,
well,
yeah,
I'm
I
just
see your
saying,
point, and the subsidized loans have definitely hit the cost of education heavily, but that is only a recent, how can you say, phenomenon
well,
since
well,
2009, I think, when Obamacare passed. But even
well, no,
historically, since the 70s until the 2000s, schools started adding fees, the public schools. So
no, I wasn't even talking about the subsidized fact of
yep,
loans. I was just saying where if you make money available, or if you put arbitrary caps on things for that, that they'll meet it, whether it's just the public market, I mean, like the private markets, or whether it's the
states,
administrators
yeah,
involved in a public school. They know they can get that money, and so they'll raise their fees to up to that point. So it's kind of like all those schools who got in
yeah. And
trouble.
then the question is, what happens? What happens when the schools paid for by the state, right? Or do they are they just going to raise the cost for the students with the parents that make money? You know what I mean? Like how that's the part where I get suspicious.
Well, can you stop the student from emancipating?
Yeah, right. And then if I'm emancipated and I file taxes and I make zero,
Do you qualify?
well, of
Because you're
course you
emancipated, so
have to.
therefore this.
Well,
Yeah,
you're
no,
18, and if you filed your own taxes, you don't have to use your parents' taxes.
exactly.
I
And
mean,
even if they wanted you to, then you just emancipate right before 18, anyways. I mean,
yeah.
there's ways
But I
around
don't see why you'd have to emancipate. You could just file your own taxes.
it. Yeah,
Yeah, and
but
then
they
your
still
family
ask.
but your family income would be zero then, right?
They still would ask you on some of the loan forms, at least for the feds and for like Pell Grants. They ask you. So they might compare notes, but knowing government agencies, they don't compare notes on
Yeah,
anything.
and regardless, yeah, there'll be ways to game it. Biggest con, we'll start with a con because there's pros are easy. My biggest con, I was writing a list of cons. How can you prevent people from other states moving to New York and taking advantage of it besides cost of living?
Do they have to be? I
It
just
just says
looked.
residence, and you'll need a year to get residency, right?
Well, it depends. Some states, it's literally a mailing address is all you need, like
Yeah.
proof, like you paid a bill.
So I could pay
Other
a bill
state,
somewhere in New York, and then
yeah. Other states, it's 1 to 2 years of
living.
like an address or bill paying in that
Yeah, I
state.
think I think California is a year.
Yeah, some states are two, but it's still you can do it if you want. But I
Yeah,
don't think that. I mean, I don't. That's a big con for sure.
yeah.
Uh,
So
but if they made it hard enough, I don't think many people would do it.
yeah, and that would be up to them to again change the system so they
Hmm.
could, you still make money from out of state tuition or you make money from foreigners. And those are things that's another con, I guess. If you weren't making any money from the local students, what stops the school from just getting more foreigners that you can charge full price? That's a huge market.
Well,
I've
that's
worked in that for 4 years. Like there's
oh
a
yeah.
lot of money in that market. Why wouldn't they tap that? Half the school's foreign students, but the other half's free.
No, uh that's what European schools, especially English schools, started to do
Hmm.
uh, when they started to subsidize so heavily. So you only got a couple thousand, like not much from each for each student coming there. But the foreign students had to pay all cash, and they were paying like 3 to 4 times as much. So they increased the acceptance of foreign students heavily.
I can't decide if that's a pro or a con. I think it's a con for the students who want to get there, who are, let's be honest, you're going to be competing with qualified, and I wrote this in my cons, you are going to be competing with qualified, like they have to limit the number of seats, be it, limiting the seats because foreigners are taking your seats, or because they literally can't afford to have unlimited seats. I think my biggest irrational thing with people who support Bernie and listen to Bernie and his ilk in the Democratic Party is they don't listen to the fact that this is not free university for everyone. It's free university for those who qualify, including entry. And that's a big point, isn't it? Like, if you can't enter, you're not going to get free school. So if they're having trouble paying the bills, don't they just like tighten up the entry requirements and get fewer students and better students, and then get more international students?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's everyone uses the Scandinavian models, like, oh my gosh, we need to be more like them. They're so great because universal health care, they have free college, all that stuff.
Yep.
But
I'll point out
proud,
the biggest con. Can I point it out before you say it and see if we agree?
sure,
In the Scandinavian countries, there is no exempt tax rate, and the minimum tax rate is very high.
yeah.
I
I
think it's
mean,
forty five
no,
percent in Denmark.
yeah, no,
Like you
that is
work at
definitely a
Starbucks and you
con.
pay 45%.
Oh yeah, no, those are all cons, but and I don't want that. But from anyone you talk to who's there, unlike in the U.S., for instance, what you just said, which made me think of it,
Yep.
that it's not free education for all. It's that Bernie Sanders was proposing. This is free education excluding up to at least 20%. Um, and the difference is in like those Scandinavian countries, they love to quote
Yep. Everybody's
it's
free.
everyone is free. There is no exemptions. You all
Yeah.
pay heavily, so you
And
all get health, education, everything,
yep, and
and no
since
one
everybody's
complains.
equally invested, nobody's
Hmm.
complaining because the rich person
Yeah.
knows they're subsidizing people, but their kids also get it. And that was one of my biggest cons. I mean, really, it's a discrimination against the richest taxpayers, who also are the ones most able to not pay taxes. So now that their kids, which they probably weren't going to send to these schools anyway, but they could have, right? Like, I want my kid to get a plebeian education. You can go to Harvard for graduate school, Junior. But now they have no incentive to do that, and why would they pay taxes in New York? Why, if I'm rich, I can just move my abode, right?
Well, if yeah, no, you literally can just you can still have your penthouse on Central Park West or
Yeah.
Central Park East, But all you have to do is literally have your Connecticut house that you spend half the year plus one there, and that's it. And then you're in Connecticut. So you can move, you can transfer your taxes. Uh, but here's like a simple thing: like they try to like exclude the rich people.
Mm-hmm.
I've met some people who make over $1 million a year in New York City,
They don't feel very rich.
and they sound no, and they said like you meet them and like they're in high finance, and you think like, oh man, that'd be great to make that money, and then you actually talk to them, and they end up just the cost of living and sending to schools and keep up appearances. They are lucky if they save couple like 10, 20, 30 grand a year,
Yeah,
and
and
that's if you're lucky.
that's not great.
No, but here's a comment on the rich people when they're trying to discriminate. Well, like you said, couldn't they just say I file my own taxes and therefore I don't have money? Well, they could say, then aren't your parents helping you at all? And you could say no, because there's ways such as like cash value whole life policies and a few other things you could do, trusts for instance, ghost trusts,
Yep.
to where you can get cash flow that is not technically from anybody, according to tax people,
Legally,
pay
yeah.
taxes, so it's legal, but you're on your own, so then you can get subsidized.
Yeah,
See,
let's not give the people too many ideas, but let's be honest, Matt is in finance. He knows a lot about this. It's in our, I know a decent amount as well. There is strategies here. And again, it is still discriminating against the people you want to pay taxes. You got to co-opt them. You can't just say, like, this system will bone you. So that's a downside. We already talked about expensive being a downside. Look,
here's a con I have.
Well, I was going to say, before you get to your con, we should give the Bernie Sanders people some pros, right? Let's give a couple. I'll give my pros, and we can react to these. Then let's do some more cons. So, of course, the tuition being cost-free for majority is a pro. But we already mentioned the con side. You mentioned it. You still have to handle cost of living. It's still a big deal. Less debt for students is a pro, right? Because then you'd have more mobility. Would you agree with that? This is what I wrote for a pro, because like we've talked about a little bit. We'll do an unemployment episode very soon. But one big thing that makes moving to respond to the job market in a country of 300 million people is debt can keep you down. Like if you're paying off debt, you might stay with a crappy job just to keep your debt payments going, and you might not take a risk.
Yeah, exactly. Oh no, I definitely the fact that you can pursue education.
Mm-hmm.
Useful education and not be saddled with exorbitant amount of debt is awesome. Like that's a huge pro. I mean, along with it comes cons, because then what about all the people who just graduated the year before?
Yeah,
you implemented this with $40,000, $80,000 of debt.
Or even our age, right? We were undergraduates 8 to 10 years ago, so our generation's still paying off their debt, and then you tell us, like, oh, you guys have to pay. Don't worry. But everybody else after you, they're fine.
No, that's tough. No, but the pro of less debt is awesome. I mean,
yeah, and that does have an economic benefit and a social benefit, definitely. So,
100%.
Let's see, my other pros, just to put us on a happy note. This is the left love to say, gives chances for more people to go to college. And me being a skeptic, I said, if qualified. I would really like to give opportunity to everybody, but don't have affirmative action. Like, make it so it's qualified. Like, are you qualified? I don't care the color of your skin. Okay, cool, let's go. I'm sure they won't do it, but wouldn't that be nice?
Well, I mean, blind help would be great. I mean, it's... for instance, if we're going to do just a portion, let's use their 125 level.
Mm-hmm.
If your parents make less than 125, 150, you get paid for free. A few of the Ivy Leagues started doing that 3 to 5 years ago because their endowment was so big they could afford it. So they started doing it. No one really talks about it, but they're doing it, and it's great because it's giving more people access to education for less money.
And then it gives you more intellectual and socioeconomic diversity.
Yeah, so all those are pros, and they're doing it they're doing it based off merit. They're not doing it based off of your skin color, what voting district you're in, your sexual orientation, your gender fluidity. I mean, it's just more of a do you fit in the school, yes or no?
Yeah, and that's a good point, and I'm sure the state schools, I hope they would do it, but I'm pretty sure they wouldn't, which makes me sad. So I'll leave it to the private schools, I guess. Let's see, another pro I had here. If done right, it could encourage more rigor and standards to keep numbers down, right? Because you're not making a profit from students anymore. Why not be rigorous? And then the schools would be better qualified and have better international rankings. And this my examples are like bell curve grades in every subject, harder entry requirements. You fail more students, more accountability. Those things could be possible. I'm not saying they would happen. I'd like them to as a teacher myself, but
I mean, my
possibility
thing,
exists.
what I mean, that's definitely a pro. I mean, but what's funny is the con I was going to do is the exact opposite of that.
What's the con? That's why I did these pros, because I think you can be positive and then hit it with the negative.
Oh yeah, I totally hope it would bring up the ratings to attract more people who didn't think they could afford it. But then a con could also be you increase uh, academic or you increase student population to schools or community colleges or colleges in general that don't deserve to get more students because they're not good
Yeah.
and they don't have good professors, they don't have good curriculum, and so you're going to school, so you think you're at college, but you're not really
You're not getting the
actually
benefit.
learning anything, and there's no benefit.
Yeah. But that's
So
what I'm saying. The system would fail unless you did have increase in rigor. And this leads me to the second article I showed you. This is from this year, May. Dream stalls as CUNY, New York City's engine of mobility, sputters. And it just talks about how the city is these schools they're going to make free are doing worse. They're having terrible maintenance. The staff is demoralized. People's classes are getting canceled or not finishing. And this is showing the dark underbelly too, right? By state-funded schools. Like when I was in my grad school in 2010 to 13, they loved cutting. Oh, here's a picture of literal. The ceiling is dripping, and they just put trash cans under it. That's great. It reminds me of where I went to school a little bit. But like when I was going to school too, they're cutting because the economy's bad. But that's the time when students need to go back to school. So in a market system, if more people are paying for school, the school would respond to the demand, right? But because government's anti-cyclical, once the tax revenues go down, they start cutting. And even now, it's a growth time technically, right? Why would the New York schools still be doing bad? Why are they still underfunded? And that brings it to, like, for example, administrative bloat is a huge issue.
I
I
mean,
think
I
it's
remember specifically at the JC that we went to, they
mhm.
built a brand. They were
The
after I
library.
left. After I left, I noticed they started to build a brand new, beautiful. It was like a 6 or 8 floor library. Like this thing was
Oh,
awesome.
don't worry. They were working on that
It
when I
was
was
state,
there.
yeah, but it was state funded, but they finally got it done after I'd already left, and it was going to be awesome. So this was taxpayer money to build a new library.
Yep.
Then, when it finally got done, not only did they go over budget, but they made it the new administration office and moved the library. Instead of going to the new building, they moved it to the old admin offices.
Freaking makes me so angry. Yeah, when I was in, I graduated 2013 last. When I was in school, the Cal States have a 3-to-1 ratio lecturers to administrators.
Oh yeah,
Like, that is a
100%.
failure of your mission. Your mission is to educate, not to give jobs to lackeys. Oh, my lord.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
I
So
mean,
that's a huge con, I think. And this article, if again, this was linked by New York Times, another New York Times article showing there is, in fact, trouble. Yeah. And they're trying to shift the costs off the state, yada yada. They're talking about the debt the students have. This poor girl's English classes are getting canceled and she can't graduate, and it costs her another year's tuition. So, yeah, it's a problem. Oh, the leaky library, my favorite. They literally have a water leak in the library. They have to put a tarp over the books. It's just like, yeah, this is the school you're gonna make free. So, yeah, there's a lot of problems. Also, if you're curious for more reading, everybody, if you read the budget office one, their most interesting solution was I support. Do not give free school forever. Put a limit on it, like 2 or 3 years for community college, 4 years for the 4 years. Do not pay forever, because if you pay less, you're making if you put a cap on the payment, you save a ton of money. And if somebody's not going to finish in 4, they're probably not going to finish. And if they need one more year, let them pay for it. They're not going to die. What do you think about
Wait,
that?
are you trying to say we all can't be Van Wilder and be at
Oh,
school for
I
eight,
think
10 years?
you can be Van Wilder all you want. I just don't want to pay for it. Let's just say I knew Van Wilders in my school too, including grad school. No. I'm just going to say no. There should be pressure for people to graduate.
Heck, I met people in my undergrad classes when I was taking some upper level uh, courses because I was bored, who were on their master's program, and they were on their like it was like first or second masters, and they were in their pushing like early 40s, and they never actually left school since 18, but they never had a
Yeah.
job either.
That's depressing. Yeah, no, when I was in graduate school, there was many. I was not a history major, but I studied with the history majors. There was history majors that were 2-year majors when I started, and I took 2.5 years, and I finished before they did. That's just, yeah, yeah,
Now
really
here's a problem
depressing.
I see with the. I was just thinking about it because you're talking about the leaky roofs
Mm-hmm.
and all that. Um, because on the we were talking about before the show, a lot of East Coast universities have been around for hundreds of years,
Yep.
more so than the Midwest and the Western public schools. So a lot of a portion of the most prestigious schools in the United States are public universities.
Mm-hmm.
So what I could see happening is that 179 million dollars over 2 years for New York. I
Yep.
could see those funds running low. So then they just send them to the failing schools, like the ones you linked from that article,
Yep.
where we're going to send the free students there and keep them out of the expensive schools.
Where the foreigners would want to go, or the rich students who pay full tuition.
Exactly. So they
Yep.
don't fill up their roles with the free students who they know they're not going to get paid for. So they get sent to the rundown schools, and then they can't afford to get state funding to go there. So then the schools get
Do
worse.
worse.
And so it could be a perpetual
A death
down
spiral.
cycle.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. And yeah, I want reform, but I would reform first, then make it free. Because if you make it free first, where's the pressure for reform? And I was trying really hard to be positive. I know a lot of lecturers, and they're good people, but the one pro I tried really hard to put myself in the position of the lecturers I know. And one pro would probably be it will retard corporatization. Is that the right word?
That's a
Corporatization.
word.
It'll kind of make the turning universities into corporations. It'll retard that, and the focus could technically be on the education again, because that is their core business. But again, requires reform. And then we get to the giant list of cons I wrote. We covered most of these. Let's see. Oh,
Oh,
here's a
I got
fun.
one pro.
Okay,
I got one pro
you got a
for you.
pro. I'm ready for a pro.
It's kind of a backhanded slap pro with killing
Okay,
me on this one.
I like backhanded. I said blackhanded, backhanded slap.
Well, so they underfund it. They find out, oh wait, tuition's more expensive, and so we can't fund as many.
Yep.
So what they end up doing is reducing the not the total tuition costs, and somehow, actually, the best way I can see doing it is just reduce the amount of money loan wise that a student at their university may receive per year, whether federal, state, or Pell or whatever. Because if the student can only receive $10,000 a year in loans, and the 5,000 in tuitions covered by the state, and they can only receive up to that amount of money, then it will drive down the cost. It will be the inverse of what I talked about costs going up to follow the availability of loans.
Yep.
If you decrease that number, tuition costs will have to follow it.
That'd be nice. And
So,
hey, I mean, if there was a accidental, perverse incentive that forced the prices of schools down again, I'd be
yeah.
all for that.
So I see that as a possible pro. Long
Yeah,
shot, but it is a
it's
possible
a
pro.
possibility. Yeah, and a couple cons I saw here. It's interesting if schools are more self-funded. it could hit what fields are decided to be useful to study or not. You know what I mean? Like I feel like in California, STEM would get all the benefit, and then all the other majors would be undersubscribed. You know, they just cut the numbers. Like we're only going to take 10 Spanish majors and 50 history majors, but we'll take 2,000 engineering majors
Oh
just
yeah, you could
because.
totally politicize the crap out of degrees.
And I
It's
think
like
that I don't know how you
we
stop that.
you
You wouldn't.
can't,
Yeah.
because it's we want to fund. The way you would do it is if it was a federal system, and so then the feds would say, if you want this money, you have to open up all these programs. But
Yeah.
then who's to stop the feds from making the
Nobody. And
specifications?
then this brings it to European systems, which people always talk about. European universities are they tend to be very micromanaged, severely micromanaged when it comes to this kind of thing. Like we need X amount of Y, pump out a bunch of these. You know, in America, like everybody's liberal arts. In Europe, everybody's econ majors. Not because they
Yeah,
like
no,
econ, but because it's the major you study if you want to be successful.
yeah,
So,
no. I'm glad you brought that up, because everyone thinks college is. It seems like one thing after another becomes a universal right. So
yeah.
everyone's thinking now college is a universal right.
Well,
Here's the
it's the
problem, and
leftist.
so they
Yeah,
and so they bring and so they bring they love Europe, so they bring Europe as an example, which is funny because pre-college, one of the education wonks largest, like, samples they love to point to, like we should be more like them, is Asia. But
mm-hmm.
once Asia hits college, they are no longer in the discussion. It switches over to Europe.
Yep.
The problem is, like you said, in Europe, and most of those top programs, they are very specific. You're not doing a dance study.
Yeah, interpretive dance studies is only at private schools kind of thing.
Yeah, you're not doing that and going to Oxford. You're
Yep.
not doing that and going to some German
Yeah,
universities or
much less common.
Swedish universities. Yeah,
Yeah, and the
I
big
mean,
key here is too. You got to remember, you can't have half of their system. It won't work. Like the German system is really popular in the Germanic countries, so Scandinavia, Netherlands, Germany, Austria. The gymnasium and the other accompanying high schools, like the secondary schools, they force you into a life course. And it's changing now where they're kind of getting polluted by us a bit, where the one that sends you to college is the most popular path. But plenty of people get put into the trades path. You know, you're going to get to go to secretary school and be a secretary. And that's the cost of a free system. You can't have everybody getting to the college
well,
level. They have to
and
fight for it,
and
and people are going to fail or not have the motivation, and they're going to end up in trades.
well, even their system right now, over the last few years, is undergoing a huge transformation and stress,
Yep.
because everyone it had a social compact that that's how we're doing it, whether you like it or not. That's how we're doing it. And they brought in so many migrants, which is for a different show. They brought in so many migrants that it's putting a strain on what's the socially accepted order for education.
Yeah.
So even that's getting strained.
It's a good point. And I think in general, this is a big issue, but you got to look at a whole situation if you're going to judge a society's education system. Because to just assume there's a way it is bullshit. These systems are thought out. What are the pros? What are the cons? What is the output of our system? The Germanic system's trying to output useful workers. You know, the Asian systems are trying to put out compliant citizens. Doesn't work very well, depends on the country. But that's the objective. The American system's trying to push out critical thinkers, not employable people. That's kind of the point of the system. It's trying to make good citizens who will also inherently be decent workers. That's the idea. So, do we want to change the system to a more, robotic system like Asia, or a more technically driven system like Europe? We have to make that decision. And I kind of hope we stick with the critical training and just make the lower levels better. But we'll see where it goes. And I think, again, we're not trying to totally crap on the free school. It has some benefits, it has some cons. You got to talk about both. But I do think you'd have to accept more of the entire system, a higher tax base. You got to exclude more people. These are all elements of what's going to happen. So,
Well, and the problem is what they're finding out, is, and there was a few weeks ago, there's a Good Economist article on it,
I'm
and they're trying to break down PISA scores, and
Yep, I saw that. It was a good
Would
article.
had higher because it was school based. And
Give it a second. You're dying. You're robot. You've gone full robot. Give it a second. It sounds pretty cool, but dude, you're a robot. God damn it. You're a robot, bro. Robot. Okay. Now you're back and you're probably not a robot.
Probably not.
Yep. Oh. Try it again. Say something. Nope. Definitely still a robot. So I will finish it out now. We've been going about 40 minutes. It's a good time. I am showing the Economist, if you're curious where this is from, I will link it. The Economist article, Must Try Harder. This is just a basic article about how people spend their time. It's an interesting article. Let's see. Is there anything cool here? Your connection should be better now, by the way. Say something. I'm just showing the education reform article really quick. Let's see. I didn't read this before the show, so
No. Well, I just wanted you to include that for further, if anyone was interested for further reading.
Further reading on especially Europe. Yep. So it's a good thing to look at, folks. Yeah. Remember, if we reform and turn to Europe, there will be cons, like more unemployment. Yay! So let's think
Spanish
about it.
unemployment, 20-something%.
Or for even France is doing okay, but still the unemployment's really high. Guess what they're trying to reform and be like? America. Hey. So nothing's a zero-sum game, and we'll follow up with this in further episodes. But for now, we've been going about 40 minutes. We want to thank everybody for listening. Since our voice connection is getting a little shady, I think the internet's tired with us. But overall, we want to say thank you for paying attention. Leave your comments. And, if you thought we did bad, dislike it. If you thought we did good, like it. Let us know what you think about this.
Subscribe.
Should it happen? Yeah, subscribe if you like it. Don't subscribe if you don't like it. We're mostly doing this for us, but if you guys contribute, that'd make us happy. We should have a couple, we'll call it a barrage of episodes up in the next week. We have a bunch of stuff we want to talk about over the New Year's, and Matt wasn't on his computer as much. And we have one holiday episode that we'll also update very soon. So thank you all for being here, and we'll see you soon.
Have a great day. Bye.